Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this Urban Design Group Future High Streets event. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Leo Hammond. I'm chair of the Urban Design Group and also Urban Design Associate Director at Lambert Smith, Hampton. So we've got a very exciting evening for you this evening. We've got 4 speakers who will be coming up. We've got David Harrison from London Living Streets, Neil Bennett from Farrells, Mark Davy from Futurecity, and Dr. Steve Norris from Lambert Smith, Hampton. So this evening's topic, future high streets. Well, I mean, what a topical subject at the moment. Various doomsayers were saying that high streets are kind of dying, or certainly dying for retail and for big stores before COVID hit. And what was the figure? Was it something like 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 purchases were actually being made online, and the internet was the death of the high street? I personally don't agree with that. Maybe death of some of the retail. Well, it's looking terrible for high streets now if you're looking at kind of the retail element of things with COVID. It must be practically 1 in 2 purchases must be made on the internet, I would imagine, these days. There's also a great opportunity, some of which I'm sure our speakers will mention. I mean, personally, and I'm sure for a lot of people, not just in this country, but around the world, people must be desperate to get back to their high streets. I know I certainly am. To walk down the high street, see a friend, feel the bustle, have a coffee, buy some groceries, all those things that we're going to want to do when things are safe and we can come out of lockdown. And also, just briefly, there's something so much more about high streets. We read about it in the media and we hear all about retail. High streets were and should be and are, in the best examples, in my opinion, about so much more than retail. They're about residential, manufacture, workshops. So maybe we can get that into some of the discussion today. So before I get on to getting our wonderful speakers going, just a little bit about the format for this evening. Each of our speakers is going to speak for roughly 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, on various different and interesting subjects. After those 20 minutes have gone by, I'll open it up to discussion. There are various ways we can get the discussion going. We've got a discussion group of wonderful and interesting people who can spark debate. And I would say, if anybody is asking a question, if you could say your name, your organisation, and who your question is directed to, that would be really helpful, especially with the technology. So people can either kind of raise a hand, which is something you can do on Zoom. You can physically raise your hand and we'll try and look out for you. Or you can post a question through the chat section. So at about 6:30, we'll begin to wind things up a little bit. And I've got a few exciting announcements, particularly on our Urban Design Group Student Awards and Book Award, and a couple of other announcements on things that are coming up. And then we'll let the discussion carry on for those that want to do it, more an informal discussion till around 7 or whenever people want to stay and chat. So I think that about covers the introduction. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce David Harrison from London Living Streets. David.
The slight interruption. David's PC is having trouble. Could we go straight to Neil?
Neil, sorry, you're being thrown straight in here.
Always happens. Okay, well, welcome everybody, and hello. I'm Neil Bennett from Farrells. I'm an urban design partner at Farrells. You can probably see I've been around the block a few times. I've advised on many towns, many high streets. I was going to follow David's piece about the history of high streets and just talk about recent history where, remembering that time where we all worked and lived in the same place, where we could bump into people, when we hadn't heard of Zoom and when everything wasn't delivered to us. Now, we were already worried about our high streets, and I guest edited, along with a colleague, Kat Carago at Farrells, the last edition of the UDG magazine, and I called my piece in there, Evolve or Die. Now, I think with coronavirus around and with a level of uncertainty that I've not come across in my life, and one that dwarfs Brexit, if you remember that word, I'm going to call this part of my talk Act or Die. I think action is the key word. Now, I think it's more important than ever that we realise that our high streets need that action, needs the hands-on management. They need now to reinvent themselves, and very quickly. and to become not just monocultural shopping centres, but multicultural, interesting places, where where something different happens every day. Now, if we start with, maybe there are some good points from the lockdown. I'd hope that with today in the newspapers, a survey saying that half the population is deeming themselves to be a bit depressed and a bit anxious, that actually we could hold on to this idea that society is important, that sociality is important, and to care about the places where people meet. And I think another thing that's happened is that my world has become somewhere where I walk to. It's become very local. I've got a new understanding of my local services and of the places that can host the social and civic elements of our lives. Now, Leo's touched on the bad news. I mean, it looks like we're going to lose a seventh of our economic activity during the year. And I think that inevitably means that we're going to lose disproportionately a lot of the smaller businesses, or some of the smaller businesses, the ones that have got the low cost base and unfortunately the low funding base. Now, I think we've also seen the end of the kind of regional department stores. I won't name them, but there's a lot of them anchor the kind of high streets. So I think what we've got is a sudden acceleration of trends we had anyway, which are going to come to a head. So it's time to act or die. So we're now in this new place where, why would you stray out of your health and comfort zone? I'm very comfortable at home. I'm not going to get coronavirus being here. Why would I go and visit the high street? And why would I go again and again? Now, for me, that's about getting towards a sort of shared understanding of what makes each place unique, what's its USP, to use that jargon, and to build a kind of personal and social experience around that. Now, why do we go to high streets now? We go to touch things. We go to a showroom. We go to see and make contact with other people. We go to be stimulated and entertained, is the kind of thing that places like Westfield understand very well. We go to get something unique, probably, and we go for convenience. And so for me, that's back to this point that high street should not just be a shopping centre, that actually it should go back to what it used to be, and what David will show you, it being a kind of multifunctional place, a place where you can do all of the things that Leo was touching on: living, working, shopping, eating, drinking, and do all of those social, civic, and healthy things throughout the day, throughout the week. Now, we do have some cavalry arriving. We've got more people wanting to live in our town centres, reversing a trend. We're getting a better understanding of how we should balance traffic and people in our town centres. And also, I think we've got this evident demand, which will be accelerated, I think, for flexible spaces to meet and to work. You can see it from the coffee shops. Trouble is, we can't wait. We've got an emergency now. And so this is to my point, that I think that now we need local centres, local high streets that do gain to encourage active management, and to use that horrible word, but overused, curation. I think every high street will need a frequent dose of adrenaline to keep it interesting and relevant, and to keep you coming back. So from our experience, what do you do first? I think the first thing is you've got to experiment. You've got to be prepared to fail. You've got to do something. You've got to get those quick wins sort of going. You've got to do something. Is one of the key things. And maybe one of the tools to do that with is to set up a sort of Farrell-like urban room, where you can set a kind of a forum, an area where you can get what I call the changes to meet. And I think the aim is to provide a continuous spectrum of space and uses, whether it's a pop-up event, which is a day long, or whether it's something that might last 5 years. And the same thing in terms of the uses of our buildings. And I think, we should try and dissolve as much as possible the issues that we've had in the past of tenancies and things like fixed use classes. Now, in the magazine, I also wrote about the example of, and my pronunciation is probably terrible, of Roeselare, which is a small town in Belgium, which has actually taken action on this. they've got several key things. They've got an energetic, passionate civic leader. They've got that backed by officers. And what they've done is they've built an effective coalition of opinion across the businesses and the communities, which turn the high street around. And I'm going to bring this to a close by just quoting their head of Regen. And she says, that a lady called Vanessa Dahulu, and she says, don't expect miracles to occur within 12 months. You have to keep maintaining and refreshing your approach for years and years. If you have passion for your city and you wanted to see it thriving, you can't just sit on your hands and watch people leaving the town. You have to try things, whatever that is. Sometimes those things won't work. Know from me that doing nothing is not an option, because you'll end up with a dead city centre. So finally, just to be a little bit provocative here, what should a town centre do first? Well, I'm one of those people who thinks that social distancing won't last forever. So I think have a party. So I think a lot of good regen starts from a party. So I'd kickstart your high street 2020 with some fun, because we're going to need it. I think, let's call it perhaps not a party, but a festival of managed transformation. And I think use that party to find out why people like your place, what they want to see, and crucially, why would they want to come back. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Neil, we'll be coming back to Neil for questions. Shall we go on? Just because David, I think, had to reboot his PC. Well, David, we'll put you last if you're back on. If we could go to Mark now. Mark Davy from Futurecity. Mark.
Hi there. I'm on screen? Yeah. Hello. Hi. So again, thank you very much. First webinar for me, so all a bit new. So Futurecity, we've been going 11 years. We've been doing placemaking strategies all over the world. And I was thinking, actually, currently we're working on 4 or 5 projects which all seem to be relevant. Basildon Newtown, which is trying to reinvent itself from its heyday in the early 60s. The Southbank Tower in Melbourne, which is one of the tallest buildings in Australia, that's going to see itself as a vertical village. We're working for the Heart of London bid, writing a cultural strategy for the central West End area. And we're working for Westfield in White City. So you've got 4 very, very different ideas of what the sort of cultural, creative and retail economy is going to be. So what I thought I'd do today is, in the limited time, is just bring some insights, that things that we're seeing and that we're starting to try to adapt into our placemaking strategies. I'll go to my screen and I will effectively, let's see if it works. There we go. So, okay, come up on the screen.
I can see it, certainly.
Yeah, good. Okay. So the first thing I've put this up on the screen. It's rather than just hearing me talk in the background, but from our point of view, from Futurecity's point of view, these are the core things for us. The high street, as we know it, we would say is disappearing. The idea of a row of shops. The only row of shops that really seem to work now are in very, very rich areas. In my article, I talked about Greenwich, where there's a cheese shop, fish shop, butchers, and so on, but it's extremely expensive. So the natural sense of a row of shops is disappearing. And we're seeing behaviours are changing. The old, we're leaving, and the young are coming through, and they're technology driven, and they're nomadic, and they have less loyalty to things. So the kind of behaviour of how we work is going to change. That's even pre-COVID. Collaboration and partnerships are key, because what we're beginning to realise is now that no one can do anything alone. And it's interesting, isn't it? If you look at the shopping centres that we have now, what they did do was offered a multiple choice. It was warm, it was safe. You didn't get rained, and we enjoyed that experience. And the high street, as a complete opposite, gradually offered fragmented ownership, individual owners, absentee landlords, fund managed portfolios. This idea that no one owns everything, so it's very hard to make major changes. So some of the things we've been looking at, and we're trying to look at more radical ideas, is can you connect up all the landlords under one ownership? Because if you're going to make big changes in the high street, it's not enough to do individual things. If I was a butcher and I was a family-owned business and I could see someone next door getting free rent while I'm struggling to pay it, I'm not sure I'm going to be very happy. Similarly, if I want to make a sweeping idea of throughout the high street, how do I get all of these individuals under one roof? So we're seeing councils like in Basildon taking quite a radical financial investment. There's leadership. As Neil mentioned about sort of charismatic leaders now taking responsibility. So there may be some issues here about local authorities buying out or even issuing CPOs on failing high streets. A radical thing would be to buy the high street and to start again. And COVID-19, as an interesting thing that's happened, I think, is it's challenged the idea of grouping together in one place, the shopping mall being herded into a space. So ironically, being outside, being in the high street, suddenly becomes perhaps an interesting proposition. There's elements that are free, you can move, you can cycle, there's fresh air. And there's in the more interesting areas, you've got history and heritage and so on. And then the other thing really is this business improvement districts. Now, I mean, they're of the scale, but is there an idea here for a smaller version that, again, offers some form of joined up approach? I've just intersected some of these with slides. This is Showfields. It actually brands itself as the most interesting store in the world. It's a 4-story retail concept, has 100 stores going direct to the customer, and free co-working space and garden, again, with free Wi-Fi. So are there radical ideas that can be brought into the high street in terms of grouping together? I think briefly, technology offers undreamed of visibility. Amazon, Airbnb, and other virtual businesses also need interaction. So experiences can create brand loyalty, which is what Apple have done. And then within that, the ideas around arts and culture is not about art for art's sake, but it's about offering identity and differentiation and originality. So this is a big deal. And I think local communities, particularly now, are important because they've got social media, so they can make their voices heard. And then just some very quick, simple ideas. The pub replaced by the co-working centre for the stay-at-homes, of which there's going to be a lot after this, with we being one of them. Spaces for lifelong learning, social services re-engaging, cultural organisations coming out of their buildings and showing their collections in the high street, in other new spaces. Schools and colleges having outposts, and less retail and starting to go back to the artisan live work. As a radical idea, this is super skilling, colour the high street, fill it full of street furniture, create series of uses, make it a place that you want to inhabit. So not just the buildings, but the streets themselves. And then lastly, this idea of hybridization, barbers that offer coffee, vinyl and live music, bookshops offering food and places to meet, jewellery stores that run workshops. We're seeing a lot of this idea now of what I would call hybridization. And also, I think Neil mentioned about curation, cultural programming skills. Someone who's got the ability to program 2 years ahead to persuade organisations to behave differently. And lastly, property owners, we need to be encouraged to be more creative. There's one example I can give you where they won't use their empty spaces because when they do use it for temporary purposes, they get charged rates. And then finally, linking the high street to the street, plug and play, cycle-friendly, cause-related ideas, a big idea for the high street. And finally, reward those who use their shops for creative non-profit purposes. And I'll just end up on this lovely little place in Piccadilly, the Santa Maria Novella, which is a little pharmaceutical, as a kind of idea of an exquisite original idea that people come from a long way away to visit. So originality and authenticity, I think, is, for me, the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. So we're now going on to our third of our 4 speakers. We're going to have Steve Norris from Lambert Smith Hampton. Steve.
Hey, Leo. I'll share my screen so you don't have to look at my face for any longer than you need to. I've got 4 or 5 minutes. It normally takes 4 or 5 minutes to introduce myself. So I'll quickly say I'm a National Head of Planning Development and Regeneration at Lambert Smith Hampton. I'm an urban geographer, retail geographer by education, and a planner by profession. I'm trying to get my slides to move down. Oh, here we go. Sorry, bear with me. Yeah, just very quickly, LSH, we are advising on the regeneration, repurposing and revitalisation of town centres across the UK, active for both public and private sector, and offering advice all across that regeneration life cycle, from strategic visioning through to planning, procurement and delivery. And obviously Leo very much involved on the urban design and master planning side. But town centres are obviously a key focus and have been for a number of years. And this report by the government February last year recognised unless urgent action was taken, then we're going to see further deterioration, loss of visitors and dereliction for many of our high streets, and seeing some of those high streets disappearing altogether. And that brought into action the High Street Fund, the task force, and the town deal as well, which is money going into town centres. A number of local authorities at the moment are putting together bids for funding to help with the regeneration of their town centres. And what we're seeing with CV19 really is an acceleration of trends that have been happening over the last decade, really, since the last recession. BPF research said a year ago or so that our high streets and towns are overshot by something like 30%. Well, you can bet that when we come out of lockdown, that it's going to be something closer to 50% for a lot of our town centres. So retail's not the answer to our problems anymore. If you think it is, you're asking the wrong questions. We've seen significant store closures and job loss since 2008, and in 2019 alone, the Centre for Retail Research said 16,000 stores closed with a loss of nearly 150,000 jobs. In March, last month, there was a record monthly fall in retail sales by 5%. And again, figures for April are going to obviously be much more significant. Footfall down by 80%, according to the various monitors as well, and not unexpected given lockdown. And national vacancy rates, again, for March, were up to 12.1%, a 5-year high. And again, coming out of lockdown, we're going to see a lot of shops and businesses that closed pre-lockdown not opening up again. It's predicted again by Centre for Retail Research, we're going to see 17.3 billion of lost retail sales in 2020. 20,000 shops could close and over 250,000 jobs could be affected. So this is a serious impact on our high streets, which we're already carrying the burden of change and transformation over a number of years, not least from the growth of online, which approximately, well, over 1 in 5 of us now do most, if not all, of our food and non-food shopping online. And again, that market share in March of 22.3% was the highest that it's ever been. And with lockdown as well and changing our habits, shopping and eating habits as well, we're seeing an acceleration in the growth in online eating out. So again, through Uber and Deliveroo, we're seeing the growth of those that home eating rather than eating out, and any impact on our food and beverage sector. And the other thing that high streets have been challenged for a number of years is it's not a level playing field. It's never been a level playing field between high streets and outer centre retail in terms of the costs that they bear, high streets, the occupancy costs and the like. And the similar now with the growth of online, it's not a level playing field. And the key challenge is how we level that playing field going forward. I just wanted to say we did some research last year with Revo, which was launched at their September conference, which was entitled Fixing Our Broken Town Centres. And a part of that, we surveyed over 200 representatives of the industry, both public and private sector, including Revos, but also ATCM and others. And the responses we got back gave us some idea as to some of the key issues and challenges. And again, we can make that available for those that want it. But one of the key things is about the critical mix of town centres. And the message is town centres need to diversify or they will die. And one of the responses to this, and this kind of wall chart here shows with the larger font representing the kind of the most seen as the most critical mix in town centres. And again, retail's important. You can't have a town centre without some sort of retail. But again, it's not the solution now. It's not the only answer. And it's about a diverse mix of uses, including healthcare, including education, arts, cultural uses, and more flexible space, particularly now as we come out of lockdown, looking at flexible retail and flexible workspace as well. And we've seen before that as well, the growth in street markets and market halls. Again, town centres being placed at the front and centre of our communities. So what's the future? Is it ghost towns or is it a brave new world? Well, for some centres there will be struggles and it will be difficult. But I think at the CV19, which is accelerating trends, really is an opportunity for a lot of our town centres to replace the old and vacant state stock, the old zombie stores, with new, repurposed, flexible and exciting commercial living space and workspace, to drive diversity in town centres, to overhaul and replace the archaic rental, lease and business rates model that's crippling a lot of the businesses in our town centres, to embrace digital technology and 5G, create smart towns and buildings, to tackle failing shopping centres and fragmented ownership. So again, resonates with what's been said before, and place our high streets really at the beating heart of our communities again, making them as safe and entertaining and green spaces. And I've heard someone recently talk about making our town centres, our high streets, our front rooms, but also I'd argue is making them our front gardens as well, and rewilding our town centres and really focusing on public space. But key to this, and again, it's been mentioned, it's local authorities were having to and will have to take back control of our town centres. The private sector are disinvesting, and local authorities need to act not just as planners and land assemblers, but as developers and funders of town centre revitalisation. And this has to be wrapped up within very robust and strong business plans and visions and actions for town centres. And as we've said again, the previous speakers have said, it all depends on strong leadership and governance. You need cross-party support, you need stakeholder and community buy-in, you need that vision, and you need commercially deliverable action plans or business plans or frameworks or strategies, whatever they are, high on design, but are deliverable. But the key challenge going forward, the key challenge is, where is the money going to come from? I'll leave that to Q&A. And there's a quote there that I'll give a prize for anyone who recognises who said that. But it's very clear, vision without action is key. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you very much, Steve. Right, and now on to our final speaker. Hopefully David is back with us and rebooted his PC. So David Harrison from London Living Streets. David.
Hello, thank you. Sorry about my internet connection being unstable. I hope it remains with us. Just a bit of background that not only from London Living Streets, but I began life writing a doctorate on medieval history, hence my long interest in the history of towns and transport, and was also clerk of the Environment, Transport and Regional Affairs Committee in the House of Commons. Spent a lot of time looking at the urban renaissance. Towns go back a very, very long way. Even in England, they go back, taking back deep into Anglo-Saxon times, well over 1,000 years ago. They begin as places sometimes for a variety of reasons, grow up around churches or secular administrative sites. They're also important parts of starting as defensive places at the time of the Danish invasion and the Kings of Wessex reconquest of the Danelaw. But they're also shopping places. And Edward the Elder in the 10th century says that no one shall buy or sell except in a market town. Could we have a slide, please, Jacqueline? Hello? Could we go to the slides? So, as well as part of shopping, a large part of shopping in the early period is to do with markets. And as early as the 12th century, we have an account of London writing that a suburb immediately outside one of the gates, there is a field called Smooth, i.e. Smithfield. Every Friday, people come to buy horses. And there are also great fairs where a lot of international selling was doing at Stamford, St Ives and Boston. So, but as well as retail, we find many other functions in medieval towns. So there are the assize courts, prisons, the local gentry are living there, there's manufacturing there, and there are lots and lots of people living there. There's multifunctional. Could we go to the next slide, please? So shops begin from a very early date. Here is the so-called Jew's house in Lincoln, where there's shops on the ground floor. They weren't exactly looking like that then. In fact, you would, on the whole, in a medieval shop, you would shop through the window, so to speak, or the opening. And just as you're seeing now with the COVID experience, but upstairs, people would be living accommodation. On London Bridge, for example, not only were there lots of shops, but 500 people were living there. So it's that mixed use, high density developments. Hospitality as well. People invested lots of money in inns. Winchester College spent £400 in the 15th century on just one inn, the Angel Inn. Next slide, please. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely fine.
So if we could have the next slide. Oh, yes. Sorry, so this is the Much Wenlock Guild Hall. Over time, you get covered protection where people can sell. So there's a marketplace at the bottom, but also at the top, you have the Centre of Local Administration. All these local towns ran their own affairs. This splendid guild hall with its court as well is still there. Of course, it's no longer used as such. And next slide, please. Oh, the key thing about the guild hall, which I failed to say, is that everything is done in a distinctive regional way. This is the way of building this with wood and daub, etc. In parts of Shropshire. Elsewhere, you'll have quite different building types using local materials. Next slide, please. So, shopping itself, people have always said that on the whole, shopping becomes a social activity around the 18th century particularly. But it happens long before that. I'm sure shopping has, for many people, been an enjoyable experience. And one of the first places where this is manifest with a specially designed shopping centre is the Royal Exchange, built by Thomas Gresham in the 16th century, copying Antwerp. Next slide, please. So social and technological change led to major changes. Shopping, as we said, has long been a major social activity, but you get technological developments have a significant impact. So glass manufacture meant it was possible for shops to have glass windows. Some of you may know number 56 Artillery Lane in Spitalfields, which is a good example of a development in the 18th century, and the windows still survive. In the late 18th century, you get a big increase in roofed properties. Oxford Covered Market, 1774. Somebody mentioned the Soho Bazaar. I think it was 1815. This was a place where there were several places together. Sorry, my internet connection is unstable. Can people hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear
Can
you.
you hear
You've
me?
got about a minute left, David.
Yep. Good.
Oh, great. Great, sorry. Here, the young Turner attended the Soho Academy and went to the Soho Bazaar buying painting materials. In 1850, and this is what this picture is about, we get the department store beginning, first in Paris and then copied all over England during the second half of the 19th century. This is Jenner's. Rail transport, a new another technological development, brings its own changes. W.H. Smith took advantage of this and developed newsstands on railway stations all over the country. In the 20th century, of course, we've had the motor car. This has had the most dramatic impact. An absolute determination of local authorities, of government, to accommodate mass car use. Wide roads. Can we go to the next slide? So we see this was once the Clarendon Hotel. It had a medieval basement, swept away in the 1950s for Marks and Spencer's. But this in itself was only very temporary. So now we've lost a vital and distinctive part of our heritage for a new development, which was very short location. And even though whole urban quarters were destroyed, they failed in a way to satisfy the consumer in a car age, and all these out of town centres developed, like the Metro Centre, Merry Hill, Meadowhall, Cripps Causeway, Stratford and Bluewater. And now we have another bout of technical change with the internet shopping and the demise of shops, including the major chain stores. So that's a very, very rushed run through of the history of our towns. Just what are the lessons? The first lesson, I think, is that there has always been change, and it's becoming ever more rapid. And we can't really do anything to stop it. Secondly, for centuries, towns were characterized by high density, multifunctional, mixed-use developments with lots of people living there, often above the shop. And it seems to me, with many functions, and it seems to me the vast number of inner-city urban car parks and redundant shops provide a splendid opportunity for repopulating towns and cities. And thirdly, local towns are attractive and distinctive using regional building materials. We must treasure our remaining beautiful buildings, not just saving the structures, but ensuring that they are part of a fine public realm. But finally, and I think this is incredibly important, government is important. Too many places have little say in their future. Today, even once great cities such as Salisbury have been reduced to the level of a parish council. Their fate is decided by central planning regulations and inspectors and county highway authorities. There are lessons of the past. I think they are useful for the future, and I hope we can learn them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And thank you to all of our speakers. Right, I'm reading our chat function and it's got going very well. I wonder if someone would like to volunteer to kick off and ask a question to one of our panel. Otherwise, I will. Is there anybody out there?